Due Process, awarded 9 Emmys, including the 2005 New York Emmy for Outstanding Crime Reporting Programming.
This is no ordinary ball game. These kids are state inmates playing ball inside a church. The idea to give them a real second chance despite a seriously bad first step. Youth Turn, up next on Due Process.
Major funding for Due Process provided by the New Jersey State Bar Foundation, committed to educating the public about the law, and by the Fund for New Jersey, supporting informed citizens for an effective democracy. Additional funding provided by Lawyer's Diary and Manual and online legal reference, elaw.com.
Juvenile delinquents, youth crime, youth violence. We all know it's a problem. What to do about it? Well, that's not so easy. I'm Raymond Brown, and on this edition of Due Process, we'll hear some very different opinions on how young lawbreakers should be dealt with. But first, Sandy King with one unique approach.
Raymond, almost all of the kids who get locked up will be back on the streets, maybe worse than when they went in. So does it just make sense to try to reintegrate them in a serious, supportive way while they're still serving time? That's the idea of Youth Turn, a program in which young prisoners of the state can meet pillars of the community, a challenging proposition for both. A Sunday morning at Bethany Baptist Church. And a well-heeled, well-educated congregation that's just blocks away but worlds apart from some of New Jersey's meanest streets.
I take chances 'cause life to me ain't no good.
Bad things.
Growing up in the hood.
You got the gangs out there, the drug selling, like different stuff, like robberies, a lot of negativity. So, bad things.
Things that scar these streets and their sons, too many of whom find their way to places like this, or even this.
I say that this is a matter of national security. It's not perceived this way. But there are too many young people now that we're losing, either to early death or to complete dysfunctionality.
So Bill Howard decided it was up to him and his mostly privileged parishioners to begin to make a difference.
Nobody should be in the center with me.
And it's not just about playing ball. It's about turning some young lives around by reaching them with a basketball, with some home-cooked food.
Most of these kids have never eaten food cooked in a home kitchen.
With some new ways of thinking.
Since I've been coming to Youth Turn, I learned like that I'm a bright young man, that I could do more than I thought I could do.
Because these aren't kids at risk. These are young men who've already committed crimes, been busted, been jailed.
When I was home, I was a drug dealer. That's what I'm arrested for.
Everybody warns their kids about the dope game, but I'm still making my profit, and the one times just can't stop it.
But now I plan to take my ambition and put it somewhere else. There are other ways to make money, and through Bethany, I learned that.
At first, I'm not used to nobody opening their arms and just like coming to me, like not even knowing me, but now I see like they offer help, like they help us with anything that we need.
And they are the mentors, the volunteers, the counselors of Youth
So
Turn.
they're getting these mixed messages, and they said, you know, I'm just surviving.
I'm the therapeutic recreation administrator for Bethany Youth Turn. And the one thing I try to pound in their head is say, look, don't be a victim of your circumstances. You may live in quote-unquote hood, or you may live in quote-unquote, you know, rough neighborhoods, but that don't mean that rough neighborhood or that hood has to live inside of you.
Can we have one night where there ain't no fight, nobody gets shot?
Shut up, bitch.
It's an all too familiar trap. But the message here is that there can be a different, better way.
Tonight we're going to have ART, which is aggression replacement training.
Even if nothing don't happen to you physically, it's gonna come back to yourself like, wow, I just did this to this person. Well, I just said this to this person. Like, I could at least had a little respect.
So if you do right, you're going to get right. But if you do wrong, there's a consequence beyond that.
At least 3 nights a week, these kids are brought from this residential lockup to the church.
The core of our population are all young men who remain incarcerated in the Juvenile Justice Commission's supervision.
But what's a program like that doing in a place like this?
To be role models to those whose lives cry out for salvation.
All I know is that they come, and there is not a single person who is not enthusiastic about the experience.
It may have something to do with how Bill Howard sees the role of black churches.
Most of them fail miserably at reaching this population.
Including Bethany.
Including Bethany.
So Reverend Howard was able to sell Youth Turn to his congregants, who lent their moral support, and to the then Attorney General, who came up with the funding.
These young men are interacting with adult men, adult women, teachers, and they're getting counseling as well as educational support.
The support system at home breaks down. It's triple our work, and we can't be everything.
Yeah, you're right.
We can't be everything.
43 lay members of Bethany Baptist Church signed up, were fingerprinted, had security clearance, so that they could be mentors to these young people.
I know you can't save all the children. I think I would like to feel that I made a difference in a child's life, help them maybe to learn that they don't have to go down that road.
One thing that I did learn is how to be positive, how to do things and have fun without being intoxicated.
Before, like, I was basically just living for the moment and living for materialistic things, but there's other things to live for than just to have the biggest car, the flyest gear. There's other things to live for.
We have a number of young men who have come right out of the DYFS system, right into youth prison, and they're bound to adult prison if we don't intervene.
And remember, these are children. They're not grown men, hardened criminals. These are children. They are salvageable, but it's going to take a little extra effort and a little extra work on our part. And so it also helps if you have a stable community organization that can serve as an intermediary and can serve that mentorship function.
In the program, that's just showing us a better way.
And for Youth Turn, we have found that in Bethany.
Let us come together. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
Not every Youth Turn kid is a success story. Of the program's first crop of alumni, several were rearrested, 2 suffered gunshot wounds, 1 was killed in a shooting. But 6 signed up for community college, even more were placed in jobs, and 2 now work for the program as junior counselors. There's also been a major change in program policy. The initial New York model, which Reverend Howard helped design during his time as president of the New York Theological Seminary, used ex-cons who were trained by the seminary to run the program one-on-one with the kids. And that's how it began at Bethany, too. But Reverend Howard says Bethany has now moved in a different direction, away from the leadership of ex-cons. That could make the program less potentially controversial and maybe more palatable, both to the congregation, Raymond, and to state funders.
And when we come back, we'll get some widely varied views on how best to fight youth crime and youth violence from the state's Director of Juvenile Justice, from a youth crime prosecutor, and from a professor of public and prison administration.
I'd like to believe in second chances. Maybe kids make mistakes, but...
Sure, there's got to be some success in there somewhere.
I think it depends on what kind of training they have and if they have someone in their life who cares about them.
I think anything is possible. I think it depends upon the kid, and I don't think that we can generalize about every kid.
If a young kid gets help early, there won't be as many problems later in his life.
My understanding is that they don't have rehabilitation for them.
Definitely. They got a shot. They still have a chance.
Child, they're influenced by what's going on in the streets. Then, then once they become an adult, they'll change.
I think a lot of them can. I don't think all of them can. So that's very sad for our society.
It's no surprise that there is some skepticism about how to cope with youth crime. And no surprise that there's a wide range of ideas on how best to do it, and lots of experts still working on the answers. They include our three guests, beginning with Howard Beyer, the man charged by the state with handling youth crime as director of New Jersey's Juvenile Justice Commission. Byron Eugene Price, meanwhile, is a Rutgers professor of public administration and author of the book Merchandising Prisoners, Who Really Pays for Prison Privatization. And from Newark, we're joined by Andrea McCoy Johnson, the assistant Essex County prosecutor in charge of the state's busiest juvenile division. Welcome to all of you.
Thank you.
Howard, let me start with you because we ended with you. That is the last time you visited us here on Due Process. We were talking about boot camp, which was different than youth turn, but it was at least an approach overall to the question of recidivism. And how would you contrast what was happening in boot camp at the time we last spoke with the nature of youth turn? How are they different approaches?
Well, boot camp was a program that kids were sent by the court for a 6-month period, and we worked with them to deal with their issues for that period of time. Youth Turn supplements the programs up in Essex County at our Essex residential program, whereby we have the full programming during the day, and the folks from Youth Turn are intertwined with that programming during the day and in the evening.
And boot camp was much more psychologically and physically aggressive.
Absolutely. Right. It was an actual program.
Right. And Byron, as we look around the country, are there still a wide variety of experiments being conducted on the question of how to deal with recidivism rates among youthful offenders?
Well, I think so. When you think about the privatization of prisons, where I think the entire process is becoming more punitive, so I don't think there's really a rehabilitation move presently, because $200 million is spent on corrections.
So it may mean that the youth turn seems to be a movement away from what's happening broadly across the country?
Yes, I would agree with that statement.
Andrea, let me ask you a question that has no theoretical background to it, but is practical. On a day-to-day basis, you deal with those juveniles who are either accused of or ultimately through a court disposition found to have committed an offense.
That is correct.
Are they primarily kids with high levels of skills in reading and writing? Are they kids who've gone to college? What is it that you can say about their skill sets and what it is that they have in common?
Well, the juveniles who generally appear before the courts, first of all, they're under 18, so they're certainly not college level. There are a variety of juveniles. There are some who are on education level. There are many who are brighter, and then there's certainly those who are, shall I say, deficient, who actually need additional support.
Would you say that most of them are in a position where, at least in terms of economic survival, their skill sets, not talking about their intelligence, but their training, doesn't suit them to the economy, or not?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that question?
Well, are these kids with high levels of reading and writing skills, however bright they are, who have highly developed skill sets that match them to the Gleaming Towers in downtown Newark or a modern economy?
Eventually, if with proper training, certainly they
But when you see them, are they in a position where they're getting that training?
No, they are not. They are, of course, they're in school. Then again, some of them are not in school. They are getting their education from the streets, and they aren't attending school. So, no, that is one of the problems, that many of them are not in school, and those who are may be not paying attention to what is being
Byron,
taught
I see
to
you
them.
nodding, and then I'm going to come back to Howard. You were nodding as Andrea was talking.
Yes,
about the skill set issue.
Yeah, I think that's extremely problematic, and I think a lot of monies are being transferred away from education, and the education budget is always cut, but correction budgets keep growing and growing. And I find that problematic, that we cut education, and we see there's a direct correlation between education and success.
And why does this lack of educational success correlate into crime or gang-related activities?
Well, you don't have the skill set, first and foremost, to participate in this very technical economy. And secondly, I think a lot of kids, they can't get programs in the schools because they don't have the money, so the kids aren't really interested in the programs that are being offered in the school system.
Howard, this point is emphasized to me because I grew up in the state where when I grew up as a child, there were American Can, Continental Can, I mean, all kinds of places where without skills, you could get jobs. That's gone. How does that relate to what's happening in programs like Youth Turn?
Well, what's interesting is, following up on what Andrea said, is that our whole foundation in juvenile justice in New Jersey is education. It is our foundation. Every one of our kids, we're our own school district, so all of our kids go to school, and we teach them academically as well as vocational school programming. We have also put an emphasis with our partners, and really Youth Turn is in a partnership that we have engaged in providing kids with not just the ability to work in a local fast food restaurant, but rather to give them skills. For instance, we have partnered with some unions and to teach kids how to be culinary artists, to be chefs, to actually get certified in becoming a chef, so that when they are done with their term, they are able to work in a casino, for instance, in the food preparation area, running a restaurant. They have the skills and the certification.
Of the kids that are currently going through, I think there's 80 in number that are or have been in the program, how many have had that kind of sophisticated training? Because that's a pretty sophisticated skill where you got tremendous income possibilities.
Well, it depends on where the program is and what part of the system they are in the commission. Up in Essex County, there are plenty of opportunities which the local church members who have businesses have opened their doors to our kids to allow them to work in those businesses, to take them under their wing and give them the confidence and the ability to be empowered to do the kind of work that they need to do. One of the things that happens, unfortunately, after the kids who have gone through the system, and I'm not making excuses for the kids in juvenile justice, but many of them are victims or come from very depressed families or homes where they haven't been given the support. So one of the things we work very hard on is giving back kids their confidence, giving them their skills that they need to educate them, to get them to learn how to read and write. There are kids who come into our system, Ray, who, when we start to give them medical care, for instance, have never been in front of an x-ray machine, for instance, are afraid to even be x-rayed to have their teeth fixed.
Let me bring Andrea into the conversation. Andrea, what we're talking about is a program that has a number of components that suggest compassion as opposed to some of the tougher public stances of boot camps and programs like that. Does that match up, in your opinion, with the kinds of kids that you see coming through the court system?
Absolutely, and this type of program is very necessary. Our kids who eventually go through the Juvenile Justice Commission programs, eventually they have to come back home. And once they come back home, they need the education, they need certain skills, they need coping skills and counseling as well, so that their reentry back to where their home is, Essex County, will be a success. The whole juvenile justice rehabilitation aspect, that's why it's promoted by programs like Youth Turn. These kids can, again, as they said, gain these skills and also the counseling that's necessary so that when they come back, they will be productive citizens versus going back to their old ways with their friends.
Well, and I think to key in on that, I think that's exactly the most important thing. In life, people want to be cared about. They want to be felt that they're important. One of the beauties of the Youth Turn program under Reverend Howard's tutelage is that those people appreciate the kids that we have. They haven't passed judgment on them as as evil doers, but rather people who are kids who are capable of becoming responsible adults.
Let me follow up on that. As a policymaker, you've got to have some concern for public perception. Is there a public perception that may provide a reaction that says you're coddling people who should be treated more harshly, notwithstanding your view that this is what works? Is that an issue in this arena? Byron, you're dealing with public policy.
Well, it is a perception. I think in the movie, the sort of procedure shows sort of reinforces that you should deal with these young people harshly because, as the lady said, some people can't be saved.
Barbara, while I'm with you, let me ask you this question. Reverend Howard is known widely as a minister who's politically active in the community, state level. He's on the transition team of the new mayor for Newark. This program is located in church.
Yes.
Does that raise any other kinds of policy or constitutional questions that we should look at?
Separation of church and state, but I think the corporatization of churches. I think when you think about the Republicans are now with the faith-based initiatives. I think you see this corporatization of churches.
But in the context of Youth Turn, does the fact that this program is housed in a church and that a spokesman for the program is Reverend Howard, does that raise any issues given the fact that there's state funds involved?
I think so. As you point out, this idea of especially separation of church and state, and whose interests are he representing? He's extremely political.
Howard, does that give you any pause?
No, no. Because we have 30, part of our responsibility is reentry, as Andrea was saying. We have 36 parole officers for 1,000 kids who are out there on parole. I can tell you this, Ray, we cannot do it alone. We need and we seek the support of the community. And when someone steps up and is willing to provide resources and guidance and care and love.
A decision, a policy decision that notwithstanding the other issues that can arise, church-state issues, that from a policy point of view, the institutions best suited to this include large numbers of churches.
Can't do it without it. Cannot be successful without it.
Andrea?
From a policy perspective, those who are willing to step up to save our children, we should work with them. From a public safety perception or perspective, if we want to make sure that those children who are coming back into our community are not educated, counseled, and helped back into the community, then from a policy perspective and a public safety perspective, we would be in trouble if we didn't have the faith-based institutions to, as a part of the community, to participate in these types of programs.
Let me build on something Andrea said, that we've got to work with the people who are willing to deal with our kids. When this program started in New York, and at the beginning at Bethany, there were ex-cons who were principally in the mentoring roles. That changed over time. Did it change because of fears of how that would be perceived, or because it wasn't thought to be an effective model?
I think it was an effective model when it first started. I remember the gentleman who was affiliated with the program was an ex-con. He did a wonderful job. I think the program itself took a different course of direction, which is fine, because the basic tenet of the program
really hasn't changed. But a decision was made. What was the decision that involved saying those are not the mentors we want?
Well, it wasn't our decision to change. Internally, Bethany changed the particular leadership. But the basic programming that went on...
But was it just a change in personnel, or was it a notion that maybe we ought not to have
I think it was more, I think, from the best of my recollection, it was just a change of personnel. But the direction of the program did not change.
Okay.
And the commitment of the folks from the local community were as involved, if not more so, than ever before.
Okay. Right. Byron, do you think that there is a perception issue involved in whether or not ex-cons are perceived as the people who should or should not be leading a program like this, and does that affect the policy?
I think there's a perception, because now in a lot of communities, it's a badge of honor to go to jail. So in a sense, it sort of validates these inmates. And if they're sort of running programs, people are saying, well, these kids say, well, maybe I could be like these inmates, although you're trying to get across a message to say that you shouldn't go to jail like the Scare Straight program, but is it effective?
All right, let me give you all a chance for one last quick answer. We'd all like 100% recidivism rate, 100% non-recidivism. What's the percentage that you would see that would make you say, this is working, we want to go in this direction?
We would very much like to get our numbers down into below 15%.
Andrea, you're there day to day. What numbers would you like to see to believe this is effective?
To be effective, if we save one child, then the program is effective.
Okay, but that's a pretty low standard in terms of overall numbers. Byron, what would you see as a number or a percentage that would say we're making a difference here?
I'd like to see 100%, but then they wouldn't have jobs if we
But
had
100% we can't, is not realistic. Is there some other percentage that says this is meaningful?
About 40%.
All right. 40 or 50%.
Every time you turn a life around, it's a success. We just put out a flyer on success stories, which lists a dozen kids who have actually turned their lives around and become successful. It's happening, right?
I agree. That's another standard. We'll have to come back and refine the standard as we go along. In the meantime, with my thanks to Professor Byron Price, to Prosecutor Andrea Johnson, and to New Jersey Juvenile Justice Director Howard Beyer, I hope you join us next week and every week for other cutting-edge issues of law and justice. Till then, for Sandy King and all of us here, I'm Raymond Brown. Thanks for watching.
So we've begun to imagine a residential facility for an even smaller number, but as a demonstration of what can happen if you really pour everything you know to put into a situation. What might be the fruits of this? We've got to do something. This is my theme around the church when people say, Reverend, this is very complicated. This is very difficult. And I say, I want you to know that I know what you say is true. But we've got to do something. And that's what we're doing, something. We can't guarantee success. We measure our progress, by the way. We evaluate our program, but there's no guarantee.
Major funding for Due Process provided by the New Jersey State Bar Foundation, committed to educating the public about the law, and by the Fund for New Jersey, supporting informed citizens for an effective democracy. Additional funding provided by Lawyer's Diary and Manual and online legal reference, elaw.com.